The shrill, insistent cry of Eleanor's alarm clock sliced through the pre-dawn gloom of her London flat at precisely 5:30 a.m. It was a sound she simultaneously loathed and relied upon, the daily herald of another relentless march against time. With a groan that was more habit than genuine fatigue, sleep was a luxury she often curtailed. Eleanor slapped the snooze button, a futile 10-minute reprieve she rarely indulged in. Today, however, the weight of the upcoming fiscal review pressed down on her even before her feet touched the cold, polished wood floor. Her apartment, a minimalist expanse of glass and steel overlooking a sliver of the Thames, was a testament to her success. Eleanor Vance, at 38, was a senior partner at one of the city's most aggressive financial consultancies. She had clawed her way up with a tenacity that had left many of her male counterparts breathless and resentful. Her life was a meticulously curated symphony of board meetings, client dinners, international calls, and the constant humming anxiety of maintaining her position at the apex. Down the hallway, in a room adorned with glow-in-the-dark stars and a menagerie of softly worn stuffed animals, 7-year-old Lily slept on, oblivious to the day's impending demands on her mother. Lily. With her sunshine hair inherited from a father Eleanor rarely thought about anymore, and her wide, questioning blue eyes was the one variable Eleanor struggled to factor into her life's rigid equation. She loved Lily with a fierce, protective instinct, a love so profound it sometimes ached. But love, in Eleanor's pragmatic world, was often expressed through provision: the best schools, the safest neighborhood, a future unburdened by financial worry. That, she told herself, was why she worked so hard. For Lily. By 6:15, Eleanor was already showered, dressed in a power suit of charcoal gray, and scanning through overnight market reports on her tablet, a cup of black coffee steaming beside her. The scent of toast barely registered. Her mind was a whirlwind of profit margins, risk assessments, and the presentation she would deliver at 10. A small shuffling sound announced Lily's arrival in the kitchen, her hair a tangled halo. A plush bunny named Barnaby clutched under one arm. "Morning. Mummy," Lily mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. "Morning. Darling?" Eleanor replied, her eyes still fixed on the screen. "Cereal is on the counter. Milk in the fridge. Don't spill it this time." Lily padded over to the counter, her small hand reaching for the brightly colored box of sugar puffs. She poured a mountain of them into her favorite unicorn bowl, then carefully added the milk, her tongue poking out in concentration. "Mummy, guess what? At school yesterday, Miss Gable said my painting of the seaside was the best in the class. She said I have a real eye for color." "That's nice, sweetie," Eleanor said, scrolling through an email. "Excellent. Make sure you thank her." Lily sat at the large, sterile kitchen island, her small legs dangling. Barnaby was propped up beside her bowl. "She said maybe I could be an artist when I grow up, like Van Gogh, but not cut my ear off." Eleanor finally looked up, a fleeting smile touching her lips. An artist. Well, that's a thought, but perhaps aim for something a little more stable. Artists rarely have good pension plans. She winked, thinking it was a shared joke. But Lily's face fell slightly. "Oh," Lily said, pushing her cereal around with her spoon. "Miss Gable is putting my picture up on the wall, for everyone to see. There's a parents' viewing next Tuesday afternoon. Can you come?" Please, her voice was small, hopeful. Eleanor's mind instantly flickered to her schedule. Tuesday. That was the pre-briefing for the Frankfurt delegation. Absolutely critical. "Oh, darling, Tuesday is difficult. I have some very important people flying in. We can celebrate your picture at the weekend. How about that? We'll go out for ice cream." The familiar shadow of disappointment crossed Lily's face. So quick, Eleanor might have missed it if she wasn't. On some deep, subconscious level, always cataloging these tiny heartbreaks. "Okay, Mummy. Lily said, her voice barely a whisper. She picked at her cereal, her earlier enthusiasm visibly deflated. The pattern was well established. Eleanor's days were a relentless barrage of commitments. Breakfast was a hurried affair, often punctuated by Eleanor taking calls, her voice crisp and professional, a world away from the softer tones she reserved, or intended to reserve, for Lily. The school run was efficient. A brief kiss on the forehead at the gates. A be good, work hard, before Eleanor's expensive saloon car merged back into the London traffic. Her thoughts already on her first meeting. Evenings were no better. She'd often arrive home long after Mrs. Peterson, the kindly part-time nanny, had given Lily her dinner and supervised her homework. Eleanor would find Lily already in her pajamas, perhaps watching television, or quietly drawing at the kitchen table. "How was school?" Poppet Eleanor would ask, shedding her coat, her mind still half on a lingering contractual detail, or a missed call she needed to return. "It was good," Lily would invariably reply, sometimes offering a little anecdote, a friend's lost tooth, a funny story the teacher told. Eleanor would listen, or appear to, nodding, making the right noises. But her gaze would often drift to her phone, the blinking notification light a siren call. Promises of quality time were frequently made, and just as frequently broken, or truncated. "This weekend, we'll go to the zoo, I promise," would morph into, "Mummy has a terribly important deadline. Sweetie, maybe next weekend?" A planned trip to the park would be rained off by a sudden client emergency that required Eleanor to be on a conference call for 3 hours. Bedtime stories became a casualty more often than not. Lily would wait, book in hand, her eyes pleading, only for Eleanor to rush in, plant a kiss on her forehead, and say, "Mummy's exhausted, darling, and I have to prepare for tomorrow. Close your eyes now." Lily had a small, tattered notebook she kept under her pillow. Eleanor had glimpsed it once, assuming it was for school. Had she looked closer, she would have seen pages filled with crayon drawings of a stick figure, Lily holding hands with a stick figure mummy, both smiling under a bright yellow sun, often in a park or at the beach. In many of the pictures, Mummy wasn't holding a phone or a briefcase. Sometimes she'd draw pictures of their family, just her and Mummy, with a little speech bubble above her own head. Mummy. "Can we play the mummy figure?" Rarely had a speech bubble in response. One Saturday. Lily had spent all morning meticulously crafting a birthday card for Eleanor. Even though her birthday was still 3 weeks away, it was adorned with glitter, pasta shapes painstakingly glued into the shape of a flower, and a wobbly, heartfelt message to the best mummy in the Woolard. "I love you." From Lily. She'd hidden it carefully, planning to give it to Mrs. Peterson to keep safe. That afternoon, Eleanor had been on a particularly stressful video call with the New York office. The connection dropping, the figures not adding up. Lily, desperate for a moment of connection, had tiptoed in, holding up a drawing she'd just finished, a vibrant, if anatomically questionable, portrait of Eleanor. "Mummy, look what I—" "Not now." Lily Eleanor had snapped, her hand held up, her face a mask of strained concentration. "Can't you see I'm incredibly busy? Go and play quietly." The hurt in Lily's eyes was a physical blow, but Eleanor, flustered and stressed, had already turned back to her screen, barking instructions into her headset. Lily had retreated, the drawing crinkling in her small, tight fist. She didn't try to show Eleanor her drawings as often after that. Eleanor knew, on some level, that she was missing things. She saw the wistful looks, the moments when Lily would start to say something then trail off, as if deeming it unimportant. She'd feel a pang of guilt, a momentary resolve to do better, to be more present. She would buy Lily expensive toys, new clothes, hoping to fill the voids her absence created. "I'm building a future for us," she'd tell herself late at night, staring at the city lights, the silence of the apartment pressing in. One day, she'll understand all these sacrifices. The parents' viewing for Lily's artwork approached. Lily mentioned it twice more, each time a little more tentatively. "It's next Tuesday. Mummy, just for a little while. I'll really try, darling," Eleanor had said, already knowing the Frankfurt meeting was immovable. But those Germans are very particular about punctuality. The day before the viewing, Eleanor was in a whirlwind. The Frankfurt pre-briefing had hit a snag. Market volatility was causing concerns. She worked late into the night, fueled by coffee and sheer willpower, barely registering Mrs. Peterson leaving or Lily being put to bed. She collapsed into her own bed close to 2 a.m., her mind still racing. Tuesday morning was a blur, a snatched piece of toast, a rushed school drop-off. "Good luck with your pictures, sweetie," Eleanor said, leaning over to kiss Lily. "I'm so proud of you." Lily looked up, her small face unusually pale. "You're not coming, are you?" It wasn't an accusation, just a flat statement of fact. Eleanor's heart constricted. "Oh, Lilybug, I wish I could. More than anything. But this meeting, it's for us. For our future. So I can keep buying you all those lovely paint sets." She tried a bright, false smile. Lily didn't smile back. She just nodded slowly, her eyes downcast. "Okay, Mummy." She slid out of the car, her small backpack looking too big for her. She didn't look back as she walked through the school gates. The Frankfurt meeting was brutal. Hours of negotiations, dense presentations, cultural nuances to navigate. Eleanor was in her element, sharp, focused, persuasive. By the time it concluded, successfully, in the late afternoon, she was drained but exhilarated. A triumph. Another notch on her career belt. She checked her phone. Several missed calls from Mrs. Peterson, which was unusual. A slight unease prickled through her. She dialed the nanny's number as her driver navigated the congested streets back towards the office. "Mrs. Peterson answered on the first ring, her voice tight with a strange anxiety that immediately set Eleanor's nerves on edge. "Eleanor. Thank heavens. There's been an accident." "An accident," Eleanor repeated, her voice hollow. The triumphant buzz from the Frankfurt meeting evaporated, replaced by a cold dread that snaked its way up her spine. What kind of accident? "Mrs. Peterson. Where's Lily? Is she all right?" Her questions tumbled out, each one more desperate than the last. The city noise outside the car window, once a backdrop to her ambition, now seemed an intrusive, cacophonous mockery. Mrs. Peterson's voice was choked with sobs, making her words nearly indecipherable. It's Lily. Eleanor. Oh, dear God. A car. She ran out. I only turned my back for a second, at the crossing near the school, after the art viewing. She was so quiet today. Eleanor's blood ran cold. The art viewing. But where is she now? Which hospital? She barked at her driver. Turn around, St. Mary's Hospital, Paddington. Now drive like your life depends on it. The man, startled by the raw panic in her voice, swerved dangerously to make a U-turn, earning a chorus of angry honks. Eleanor barely registered them. They took her to St. Mary's, yes, Mrs. Peterson managed. The paramedics, they were working on her. Eleanor, I'm so sorry, so terribly sorry. Eleanor wasn't listening to the apologies. Her mind was a maelstrom of flashing images Lily's pale face that morning. Her downcast eyes, the words, "You're not coming," are you echoing like a condemnation. The driver sped through the London streets, weaving through traffic with a skill Eleanor, in her current state, could neither appreciate nor condemn. All she could see was Lily needing her, and she hadn't been there. She'd been in a sterile boardroom, discussing profit margins while her daughter. The journey seemed to stretch for an eternity. Each red light, each traffic jam a fresh torment. Eleanor clutched her phone, her knuckles white, her manicured nails digging into her palm. She tried to pray, but no words came. Only a frantic, silent plea to a universe she had long since stopped believing in. The city, moments before a symbol of her triumphs, now felt like a labyrinth designed to keep her from her child. When they finally screeched to a halt outside the accident and emergency entrance of St. Mary's, Eleanor threw open the car door before it had fully stopped, stumbling onto the pavement. She ran, her expensive heels clattering uselessly, towards the automatic doors that slid open to reveal a scene of controlled chaos. The smell of antiseptic and fear hit her like a physical blow. "My daughter," she cried, her voice cracking. To the first person in scrubs she saw, Lily Vance. She was brought in. An accident. The nurse, a young woman with tired eyes, looked at her with a practiced calm that Eleanor found unbearable. "Vance. One moment. Madam." She typed into a computer, her expression unreadable. Eleanor wanted to scream, to shake her, to demand answers. "Mrs. Peterson." Her face streaked with tears, her usually neat gray hair disheveled, rushed towards her from a waiting area. "Eleanor. Oh, my dear. Where is she?" Martha Eleanor gripped the nanny's arm, perhaps too tightly. Is she conscious?" Before Mrs. Peterson could answer, a doctor, older, his face etched with a weary compassion, approached them. "Mrs. Vance." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. "Yes, that's me. How is she? Can I see her?" The doctor's eyes were full of a sorrow that made Eleanor's legs feel weak. He gestured towards a small private room off the main corridor. "Perhaps we could talk in here for a moment." The room was small, functional, and utterly devoid of comfort. Eleanor found herself sitting, though she didn't remember moving. Mrs. Peterson stood beside her, her hand on Eleanor's shoulder, trembling. "Mrs. Vance," the doctor began, his voice gentle but firm. "Lily was brought in 20 minutes ago. She had sustained multiple critical injuries. We understand it was a road traffic accident." Eleanor nodded, unable to speak, a roaring sound filling her ears. The paramedics performed CPR at the scene and continued en route to the hospital. "Here, our trauma team did everything humanly possible. Everything." He paused, and in that pause, Eleanor knew. She saw it in the pity in his eyes, in the careful way he chose his words. But her injuries, they were too severe. He looked directly at Eleanor, his gaze unwavering. "I'm so incredibly sorry. Mrs. Vance. We couldn't save her. Lily has passed away." The words hung in the air, stark and brutal. Passed away. Not Lily. Not her vibrant, laughing, paint-smudged Lily. It was a mistake, a horrible, nightmarish mistake. Eleanor stared at him, a choked sound escaping her. No, you're wrong. She can't be. She's just 7. She had her art viewing today. I promised her ice cream." Her voice was rising, hysteria lacing its edges. "I need to see her." "You've made a mistake." The doctor's expression didn't change, only deepened with sorrow. "I wish I had. Mrs. Vance. I truly do. Mrs." Peterson was openly weeping now, her body shaking with silent sobs. Eleanor felt strangely numb, as if encased in ice. "I want to see her," she said again, her voice flat, devoid of its earlier panic, replaced by a chilling certainty. The doctor hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Of course. This way." He led them down a quiet corridor, the bustling noise of the A&E fading behind them. He stopped outside a door, his hand resting on the handle. "She's in here. Take all the time you need. Eleanor pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was dim. The only sound the faint hum of unseen machinery. And there, on a bed too large for her small frame, lay Lily. She was so still. Her sunshine hair, usually so full of life, was spread out on the pillow. Her face was pale, serene, almost like she was sleeping, but it was a stillness Eleanor had never seen before, a terrifying, absolute stillness. A small purple bruise was visible on her temple, a stark contrast to her translucent skin. A single errant curl lay across her forehead. Eleanor approached the bed, her legs moving stiffly, as if wading through water. She reached out a trembling hand and touched Lily's cheek. It was cool. Not cold. Not yet. But cool. "Lily," she whispered. "Lily Bug. Wake up, darling. Mummy's here now." There was no response. No flicker of an eyelid. No tiny sigh. Eleanor's carefully constructed composure shattered. A strangled sob tore from her throat, a sound of such profound agony that it seemed to rip through her very soul. She sank to her knees beside the bed, her hand still on Lily's cheek, the tears finally coming, hot and fast, a deluge of pain and regret. "No, no, no," she wailed, the sound muffled against the crisp white sheet. "Not my baby. Please, not my Lily." The success of the Frankfurt meeting, the accolades, the promotions, the expensive apartment, the portfolio she had so meticulously built, it all turned to ash in her mouth. None of it mattered. Nothing mattered except the small, still form on the bed before her. She remembered Lily's hopeful face that morning, asking about the art viewing, Eleanor's casual dismissal. "It's for us. For our future." What future? What had she been thinking? The weight of every missed moment, every broken promise, every rushed bedtime story, every "not now, Lily" crashed down on her with an unbearable force. She had been chasing a future that would never arrive, sacrificing the precious, fleeting present. And now, the present was all she had left, a present filled with an empty cot, a silent room, and a pain so vast it threatened to consume her entirely. Mrs. Peterson stood in the doorway, her own grief a palpable presence. But she didn't intrude. This was Eleanor's Gethsemane, a private agony she had to face alone. Hours seemed to pass. Eleanor didn't move, except to gently stroke Lily's hair, murmuring broken apologies, fragments of forgotten lullabies, desperate pleas for forgiveness that would never be heard. The hospital staff were kind, unobtrusive, bringing her water she didn't drink, offering words of comfort she couldn't process. Eventually, as the gray light of a London evening began to filter through the blinds, someone, a nurse, perhaps the doctor, gently suggested it was time. Time for what time to leave her child. The thought was an obscenity, but they had forms to sign, arrangements to be made, the brutal, bureaucratic machinery of death grinding on, indifferent to her shattered heart. Eleanor walked out of that room, out of the hospital, like a ghost. The vibrant city outside, with its ceaseless traffic and bustling crowds, seemed to exist in another dimension. Her driver, his face pale and shocked, was waiting. He opened the door for her, his earlier urgency replaced by a respectful, somber silence. The drive back to her apartment, the monument to her success, was a blur of unshed tears and a hollowing emptiness. When she finally stood in the hallway of her silent home, the scent of Lily, that faint, sweet smell of innocence and Johnson's baby powder that always clung to her room, was a fresh torment. She walked, as if in a trance, to Lily's bedroom. The unicorn duvet was neatly pulled up. Barnaby the bunny sat propped against the pillows, his button eyes seeming to stare at her with a silent accusation. On the small desk, a half-finished drawing lay beside a pot of crayons. It was a picture of a smiling girl with bright yellow hair, holding hands with a woman who had a briefcase in one hand and a phone to her ear. This time, however, Lily had drawn a small, jagged red line through the phone. Eleanor picked it up, her fingers trembling. The simplicity of it, the unspoken plea, was a knife to her heart. She sank onto Lily's small bed, clutching the drawing, the silence of the apartment pressing in, suffocating her. The city lights outside, once a symbol of her ambition, now seemed to mock her, cold and distant stars in an empty universe. The full weight of her loss, of what she had squandered, was only just beginning to dawn. The days that followed Lily's death were a thick, suffocating fog. Eleanor moved through them like an automaton, her sharp intellect blunted, her decisive nature paralyzed. The funeral was a blur of hushed voices, sympathetic faces she barely registered, and the unbearable sight of a small white coffin adorned with lilies, her Lily's namesake flower, now a symbol of an unimaginable loss. Colleagues from the firm attended, their expressions a mixture of awkward pity and genuine sorrow. Her own parents, long divorced and living separate, distant lives, flew in, offered stilted condolences, and then, as if unsure how to navigate the depths of her grief, flew out again, leaving Eleanor even more adrift in her silent, opulent apartment. Work, once the central pillar of her existence, ceased to hold any meaning. Her phone buzzed incessantly with calls and emails from the office, urgent queries, strategy meetings she was missing, concerns about the Frankfurt account. She ignored them all. The ambitious, driven Eleanor Vance was gone, replaced by a hollow shell who spent her days staring blankly at the expensive art on her walls, or wandering from room to room, the silence amplifying the roaring emptiness within her. Sleep was a battlefield, offering no respite, only vivid, tormenting dreams of Lily's laughter, her small hand slipping from Eleanor's grasp, her disappointed face turning away. Food lost its taste. The meticulously planned routines that had once defined her life dissolved into an endless stretch of desolate hours. Mrs. Peterson came by a few times, her kind face etched with concern, bringing casseroles Eleanor barely touched, offering a comforting presence Eleanor couldn't fully accept. The guilt was a relentless companion, whispering insidious accusations in the quiet moments. You weren't there. You chose a meeting over her. You failed her. Weeks bled into a month. The initial shock had subsided, giving way to a gnawing, aching pain that settled deep in her bones. One gray afternoon, as rain lashed against the panoramic windows of her living room, Eleanor found herself drawn, as if by an invisible thread, towards Lily's bedroom. She hadn't been able to bring herself to enter it properly since that first terrible night. Mrs. Peterson had kept the door closed, a silent understanding passing between them. With a trembling hand, Eleanor pushed the door open. The room was exactly as Lily had left it. The unicorn duvet, Barnaby the bunny still propped against the pillows, the half-finished drawing on the desk, the faint, sweet scent of her daughter still lingered. A ghostly presence that was both a comfort and a torment. An overwhelming urge to feel close to Lily, to understand the child she had so catastrophically neglected, compelled her forward. She decided, with a sudden, desperate clarity, that she needed to go through Lily's things, not to dispose of them. The thought was unbearable, but to find something, a piece of Lily she hadn't known. She started with the small bookshelf, her fingers tracing the spines of beloved storybooks, the Gruffalo, Where the Wild Things Are, a well-thumbed collection of fairy tales, books Eleanor had often been too busy or too tired to read at bedtime. Tucked between two larger volumes, she found a slim, brightly colored notebook, the kind primary school children use for doodling. Its cover depicted a cartoon cat chasing a ball of yarn. It wasn't a school exercise book. Curiosity, mixed with a profound sense of trepidation, made her open it. The first few pages were filled with Lily's familiar drawings, suns with smiling faces, lopsided houses, and stick figures of her and Mummy. But then, the drawings gave way to careful, slightly wobbly handwriting. It was a diary. Lily's diary. Eleanor sank onto the small floral rug, her heart pounding. Dear Diary. The first entry began, dated almost a year ago. Today, Mummy was on the phone all dinner. I wanted to tell her about the hamster in class, but she said, shh. I hope the hamster is not sad like me sometimes. Eleanor's breath hitched. She read on, page after page, each childish observation a fresh stab of pain. Mummy promised we would go to the park on Saturday, but then Mr. Henderson from her office called and she had to work. She said next time. Barnaby and I had a picnic in my room, but it is not the same. Miss Gable said my story about the magic tree was very good. I wish Mummy could read it, but she comes home so late and she is always tired. I will save it for her. Attached to the page with sticky tape was a folded piece of paper. Eleanor carefully unfolded it. It was a short story, written in Lily's neatest print, about a little girl who finds a tree that grants wishes, and her only wish is for her Mummy to have more time to play. Tears streamed down Eleanor's face, blurring the words. She saw now, with devastating clarity, the quiet longing her daughter had harbored, the gentle understanding that far surpassed her tender years. Lily hadn't been angry, not in the way an adult would be. She had been sad, and she had understood, far too well for a child, that her mother was busy. One entry, dated only a few weeks before the accident, pierced Eleanor to the core. Mummy, I know you work very hard to get me nice things and for my school. Thank you. Mummy, I am not cross. I just wish, really, really wish, that for my birthday, you did not have to go to that place called Paris for your work. Maybe we could just stay home, and you could read me my new space book all afternoon. That would be the best present ever. Eleanor remembered that Paris trip, a crucial conference. She had brought Lily back an expensive doll, a miniature Eiffel Tower. She had thought that was enough. How could she have been so blind, so utterly, devastatingly wrong? Her hands shaking, she continued her search, a desperate archaeologist unearthing the fragments of a lost world. In Lily's little desk drawer, beneath a pile of colorful pipe cleaners and some glitter glue, she found a small, decorated shoebox. The label, written in Lily's careful hand, read, Lily's Special Treasures. Inside, nestled on a bed of cotton wool, were an assortment of items: a particularly shiny conker, a heart-shaped pebble, a slightly chipped plastic dinosaur. And then she saw them, a collection of small, handmade tickets. They were scraps of colored paper, carefully cut out. One, a piece of blue card, read good for one trip to the zoo with Mummy. No expiry date. Another, on pink paper. This ticket is for one big hug from Mummy when she is not on the phone. There were at least a dozen of them, each a testament to a simple, unfulfilled wish. A VHO, a waiting ticket, as the Vietnamese outline had so poignantly described it. A collection of deferred dreams. The unfinished drawing she had found on the night Lily died was still on the desk. She picked it up again, her vision blurred by fresh tears. The smiling Lily, holding hands with a mother whose face was a blank outline. The phone starkly crossed out in red. It wasn't just an observation, it was a plea. A plea Eleanor had been too preoccupied, too self-important to hear. She found Lily's school bag, still packed from that final day. Inside, amongst her reading book and a half-eaten apple, was her art folder. Eleanor pulled out the painting Miss Gable had praised, a vibrant, joyful depiction of a sunny beach, the waves a swirling mix of blues and greens, and tucked behind it, a smaller, newer drawing. It was a picture of Lily and Eleanor, standing side by side. Lily was holding up her painting, her face beaming. Eleanor, in this picture, was smiling too. No phone, no briefcase, just looking at Lily with pride. At the bottom, in wobbly letters, Lily had written, Mummy came to see my picture. It was the best day, but Eleanor hadn't come. This picture wasn't a record of what had happened. It was a depiction of what Lily had desperately hoped would happen. The innocent optimism of it was a final, brutal blow. The hours passed. Eleanor sat on the floor of Lily's room, surrounded by these simple, heartbreaking relics of her daughter's short life. The truth that was revealed wasn't a shocking secret or a hidden betrayal. It was something far more painful, the quiet, uncomplaining depth of her daughter's love and longing, and the monumental scale of her own oblivious neglect. She had been so focused on providing a material future that she had starved her child of the one thing she craved most, her mother's time, her mother's undivided attention. The weight of her regret was a physical entity, pressing down on her, stealing her breath. "Oh, Lily," she whispered into the silent room, her voice hoarse with unshed screams. "What have I done? Why didn't I see the success she had strived for? The accolades she had accumulated now felt like fool's gold, worthless trinkets in the face of this unbearable loss." As darkness crept into the room, Eleanor didn't move. She sat amidst the scattered treasures, the tangible evidence of Lily's gentle spirit. The pain was still immense, a raw, gaping wound. But through the agony, a new, fragile feeling began to emerge. Not hope, not yet, but a flicker of understanding. She had failed Lily in life, but perhaps, just perhaps, in honoring these rediscovered memories, in truly seeing her daughter for the first time, she could find a way to navigate the desolate landscape of her grief. The journey ahead was terrifyingly uncertain, but for the first time since Lily's death, a pinprick of light, however faint, seemed to pierce the overwhelming darkness. She had to understand more. She had to find a way to live with this, for Lily. The contents of Lily's shoebox and her simple, heartfelt diary became Eleanor's most treasured and most painful possessions. They were a map to a world she had barely glimpsed while her daughter was alive, a testament to a love so pure and unassuming it broke her heart anew each time she revisited them. The initial storm of raw grief had passed, leaving behind a desolate landscape of aching sorrow, but also a fragile, emerging resolve. She couldn't change the past, couldn't bring Lily back, but perhaps she could try to understand, to connect with the daughter she had effectively lost long before that fateful Tuesday. Her first tentative step was prompted by one of Lily's handmade special treasure tickets, good for one trip to the zoo with Mummy. No expiry date. The London Zoo. Lily had talked about it for weeks after a school trip there the previous year, begging Eleanor to take her again so she could show her the penguins and the majestic lions. Eleanor had always found an excuse, a looming deadline, an important client dinner, sheer exhaustion. One crisp autumn morning, weeks after she had last set foot outside her apartment for anything other than a solitary, aimless walk in the nearby park, Eleanor found herself standing before the grand entrance of the zoo. She bought a single adult ticket, the words feeling like a lump in her throat. As she walked through the gates, she felt an almost paralyzing sense of Lily's absence. Every child's excited shriek, every family laughing together, was a fresh stab of pain. She found the penguin enclosure, remembering Lily's animated descriptions of their waddling walks and sleek dives. She stood there for a long time, watching them, trying to see them through Lily's eyes. She imagined Lily's small hand tucked into hers, her bright voice chattering about which penguin was the funniest. The grief was a physical presence, threatening to overwhelm her, but she stood her ground, a silent promise to the memory of her daughter. Later, she sat on a bench opposite the lion enclosure, just as Lily had described, watching the powerful creatures pace. The sun was weak, but it cast long shadows, and for a fleeting moment, Eleanor felt a strange sense of peace, a painful but undeniable connection to the daughter she was only now truly getting to know. Another day, clutching the small, tattered spacebook Lily had mentioned in her diary. "Maybe we could just stay home and you could read me my new spacebook all afternoon." Eleanor sat in Lily's silent room. She opened it. The colorful illustrations of planets and stars, a stark contrast to the grayness of her mood. She began to read aloud, her voice husky and hesitant at first, then growing steadier as she imagined Lily curled up beside her, listening with wide-eyed wonder. She read the entire book, from cover to cover, the silence in the room pressing in when she finally finished. It was a small act, insignificant to the world, but for Eleanor, it felt like a sacred ritual, a belated offering. The prompt in the original outline about learning from Lily's teacher, Miss Gable, resonated deeply. Eleanor found the school's number and, after several aborted attempts, finally made the call. Miss Gable's voice was warm, tinged with sadness when Eleanor introduced herself. They arranged to meet. The primary school felt alien to Eleanor. She had only ever been there for rushed drop-offs and pickups, or the occasional perfunctory parents' evening. Miss Gable, a kind-faced woman in her late 40s with gentle eyes, led her to a quiet staff room. "Mrs. Vance, Eleanor," Miss Gable began, her voice soft. "I was so terribly sorry to hear about Lily. She was a very special little girl, a bright spark in our class." Eleanor nodded, unable to trust her voice. "She talked about you a lot. You know," Miss Gable continued, a faint smile playing on her lips. She was incredibly proud of her mummy. She'd tell the other children, "My mummy is very important. She works in a tall building in the city and helps lots of people." Eleanor flinched inwardly. Even in her childish innocence, Lily had tried to cast Eleanor's ambition in the best possible light. Miss Gable seemed to sense her turmoil. "She did miss you, of course." Sometimes, when the other children would talk about weekend plans with their parents, Lily would get very quiet. "Once," she told me, "my mummy is always very busy, but it's because she loves me and wants me to have a good future." She understood, in her own way, but she longed for your time. Eleanor, little things. She once drew a picture of you both at her art viewing, the one you couldn't make. She was so hopeful you'd be there. Miss Gable's eyes glistened. She kept it in her tray for days afterwards. The teacher's words, though gentle, were like tiny shards of glass embedding themselves in Eleanor's heart. Lily had understood, had even made excuses for her, all while quietly yearning for the simplest of connections. The conversation laid bare another layer of her own failure, yet it also painted a fuller picture of Lily's resilience and unwavering love. Leaving the school, Eleanor felt a profound shift within her. The acute, incapacitating grief was still present, but it was now interwoven with a deeper understanding of Lily's spirit. The journey was no longer just about mourning, it was about honoring that spirit. But how? Her high-powered career, once the defining feature of her identity, now seemed like a hollow charade. The thought of returning to the relentless pressure, the endless meetings, the constant striving for more, filled her with a profound sense of revulsion. What had it all been for? If it had cost her the precious, irreplaceable years with her daughter, the internal struggle was immense. Part of her, the ambitious, conditioned part, whispered that she was throwing away everything she had worked for. But a stronger, more insistent voice, a voice that sounded remarkably like Lily's quiet wisdom, asked, "But what did you truly gain, Mummy?" Forgiving herself seemed an impossible task. Every memory of a dismissive word, a broken promise, a moment of impatience, rose up to torment her. She would spend hours staring out at the London skyline, the city lights no longer symbols of her success, but a cold, indifferent witness to her profound loss and regret. How could she ever atone for her negligence? One evening, sorting through a box of Lily's old craft supplies, glitter, pipe cleaners, scraps of felt, she found a half-finished project, a small, lopsided felt heart, clumsily stitched, clearly meant to be a keyring or a decoration. Lily had probably been making it for her, The simple, imperfect object, crafted with such love, seemed to encapsulate everything she had missed. An idea, fragile and tentative, began to form. It wasn't a grand plan, not a solution to her pain, but a small, possible step forward. Lily had loved to create, loved to share. What if Eleanor could find a way to channel that spirit? She thought of the other children at Lily's school, of Miss Gable's gentle words. She thought of the special treasures Lily had collected, the simple joys she had found in everyday things. The next morning, Eleanor made another call, this time not to her office, but to Lily's primary school. She spoke to the headmistress, her voice surprisingly steady. She proposed an idea to set up a small fund in Lily's name, something to support art supplies for the children, or perhaps fund a little garden project Lily would have loved. It wouldn't bring Lily back. Nothing could. But it felt right. It felt like a way to keep Lily's bright spirit alive, to create something positive from the ashes of her own devastating failure. The headmistress was deeply moved by the offer. As Eleanor ended the call, a sliver of something akin to peace settled within her. It wasn't happiness, not joy, but a quiet sense of purpose. The path ahead was still shrouded in mist, the pain of Lily's absence a constant companion. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she could see a faint glimmer of light, a narrow path leading out of the suffocating darkness. It was a path paved with Lily's memory, a path that might, eventually, lead her not to forget, but to live a life that truly honored the precious, fleeting gift she had been given and had so tragically failed to appreciate in time. The journey to forgive herself was only just beginning, but now, at least, she had a direction. The decision to establish the Lily Vance Bright Futures Fund at Northwood Primary was the first truly proactive step Eleanor had taken since the world had fractured. It was a small seed of intention planted in the barren soil of her grief, and tending to it became her quiet, consuming focus. The initial conversations with the headmistress, Mrs. Davies, and Lily's beloved teacher, Miss Gable, evolved into regular meetings. They spoke of Lily's love for vibrant colors, her fascination with the natural world, and her innate kindness. From these conversations, the dual purpose of the fund emerged to provide an abundance of art supplies, ensuring no child's creativity was hampered by lack of resources, and to create a small memorial garden in a neglected corner of the school playground. Eleanor found herself back at the imposing glass tower of her firm, not to resume her relentless pursuit of profit, but to tender her resignation. Her managing partner, Arthur Henderson, the Mr. Henderson whose calls had so often interrupted Lily's childhood, was initially incredulous, then visibly unsettled. "Eleanor, are you certain about this?" he'd asked. His brow furrowed. "You're at the peak of your career. We need you. The Frankfurt account is still delicate. Perhaps a longer sabbatical." Eleanor met his gaze, her own calm and resolute. The ambition that had once burned so fiercely within her had been extinguished, replaced by a quiet certainty. "Arthur, I appreciate your concern and your past support, but my priorities have irrevocably shifted. The work we do here, it no longer aligns with the life I need to live." There were no dramatic pronouncements, no bitter recriminations, just a simple statement of fact. She saw a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, perhaps a dawning understanding, perhaps just annoyance at the inconvenience her departure would cause. It no longer mattered to her. She signed the papers, packed the few personal belongings from her sterile, high-view office, a photograph of a smiling Lily from a long-ago holiday, a framed print Lily had made in nursery, and walked away from the life she had so meticulously built, feeling not a shred of regret, only a profound sense of release. The opulence of her Thameside apartment, once a symbol of her achievements, now felt like a gilded cage, each room echoing with Lily's absence. The minimalist decor, the expensive art, the panoramic views of a city that never slept. It all seemed hollow, a monument to a life misspent. With a clarity that surprised even herself, she put it on the market. She found a small, unassuming cottage in a quieter, leafier part of London, not far from Northwood Primary. It had a little garden, overgrown and wild, but full of potential. A place where, perhaps, something beautiful could be coaxed back to life. Moving was a practical and symbolic act of dismantling her old self, creating space for whatever new version of Eleanor might emerge. Her days found a new rhythm, entirely different from the relentless, clock-driven schedule she had once thrived on. Mornings were often spent at Northwood. Initially, she focused on the administrative side of the fund, working with Mrs. Davies to ensure transparency and impact. But soon, Miss Gable gently encouraged her to be more involved. "The children are asking about Lily's garden," she said one day, her smile kind. "They're excited. We're planning a planting day next month. Perhaps you'd like to help choose the flowers." And so, Eleanor found herself poring over gardening catalogs, researching plants that attracted butterflies. Lily had adored butterflies, and flowers that bloomed in bright, cheerful colors. She visited local nurseries, her hands, once accustomed to the cool plastic of a smartphone or the weight of a Montblanc pen, now tentatively touching soft petals and rough soil. The planting day was a revelation. It was chaotic, noisy, and muddy. Children, armed with miniature trowels and watering cans, buzzed with excitement. Eleanor, dressed in old jeans and a sweatshirt, found herself kneeling in the dirt alongside them, showing a small boy how to gently place a marigold seedling into the earth, helping a little girl with pigtails water a newly planted lavender bush. There were moments when a child's laughter, or a fleeting resemblance to Lily in a fleeting expression, would bring a fresh wave of pain, so sharp it stole her breath. But for the first time, the pain was not entirely desolate. It was mingled with a sense of connection, a feeling of doing something, however small, that Lily would have loved. Miss Gable, observing Eleanor's quiet interaction with the children, her gentle guidance, remarked one afternoon, "Lily would have been so happy to see you here. Eleanor, she always wanted you to be part of her world." The words were a balm to Eleanor's wounded soul. She wasn't replacing Lily, or trying to fill the void her daughter had left. That was impossible. But she was, in a small way, honoring Lily's spirit, fostering the joy and creativity Lily had embodied. The journey towards self-forgiveness was the hardest part of her new existence. There were still nights when she would wake, her pillow damp with tears, the weight of her past negligence crushing her. The what-ifs and if-onlys were persistent, insidious ghosts. She started seeing a grief counselor, a compassionate woman who listened without judgment as Eleanor poured out her guilt and sorrow. "Grief is love with nowhere to go, Eleanor," the counselor said one session, "and regret is often a sign of how deeply we loved and how much we wished we could have done differently. The task is not to erase the regret, but to learn to live with it, to let it inform a more conscious way of living now." Eleanor held on to those words. She began to understand that her pain was a testament to the love she had, and still had, for Lily. It was a sacred wound, one that would likely never fully heal, but one she could learn to carry with grace. She kept Lily's special treasures box in her new, smaller home. The handmade tickets, the diary, the drawings, they were not hidden away, but kept in a place where she could see them, touch them. They were no longer just sources of agonizing regret, but also reminders of Lily's pure heart, her simple wisdom, and the profound lessons she had inadvertently taught her mother. The crossed-out phone in Lily's drawing became a potent symbol. Eleanor found herself consciously putting her own phone away when she was with others, striving to be truly present, to listen with her whole being, things she had so rarely done for Lily. She reconnected with Mrs. Peterson, not as an employer, but as a friend. They would meet for tea, sharing memories of Lily. Their conversations often punctuated by both tears and gentle laughter. Mrs. Peterson, who had carried her own burden of guilt over the accident, found solace in Eleanor's quiet strength and her determination to create something positive from the tragedy. Even her relationship with her own parents, though still distant, found a new, fragile footing. She wrote them long, honest letters, not seeking absolution, but sharing her journey, her pain, and her dawning understanding of what truly mattered. For the first time, they seemed to see her not as the high-flying, invincible executive, but as a grieving mother, a vulnerable human being. Their replies were still tinged with their own awkwardness, but there was a new warmth, a hesitant reaching out. 2 years passed. The Lily Vance Memorial Garden at Northwood Primary was a riot of color from spring through autumn. Butterflies danced among the lavender and buddleia. Children's laughter often filled the air as they tended to their small plots or sat on the brightly painted benches, reading books funded by Lily's legacy. The art room buzzed with creativity, stocked with an abundance of paints, crayons, and modeling clay. Eleanor was a regular, quiet presence at the school, not as a benefactor from afar, but as a volunteer, helping Miss Gable with art classes. Her hands often smudged with paint, her face softer, etched with a sorrow that had found a measure of peace. One sunny afternoon in late May, almost the anniversary of that terrible day, the school held a small garden party to celebrate the children's work. Tables laden with juice and biscuits were set out near the garden. Children proudly displayed their artwork, vibrant paintings, lopsided clay animals, colorful collages. Eleanor stood slightly apart, watching a group of children excitedly pointing out different flowers to their parents. A small girl with bright red pigtails, a smudge of paint on her nose, ran up to her, clutching a drawing. "Mrs. Vance. Look," she exclaimed. "This is for Lily's garden. It's a rainbow butterfly." Eleanor knelt, her heart aching with a familiar bittersweet pang. She looked at the drawing, a wonderfully imaginative creature with wings of every conceivable color. "It's beautiful. Daisy," she said, her voice soft. "Lily would have loved it very much." Daisy beamed, then darted off to rejoin her friends. Eleanor watched her go, a gentle smile touching her lips. The pain of Lily's absence was still there, a constant, dull ache beneath the surface of her days, but it no longer consumed her. It was now intertwined with a profound sense of love, a quiet purpose, and a hard-won acceptance. Later, as the party wound down and the last of the families began to leave, Eleanor lingered in the garden. The late afternoon sun cast long, warm shadows. She touched the petals of a deep pink rose, its scent sweet and delicate. She thought of Lily, of her laughter, her bright spirit, her unconditional love. She had missed so much, squandered so many precious moments. The regret was a scar she would always carry. But Lily's legacy was not just the garden or the art fund. It was in the quiet transformation of Eleanor's own heart. Lily, in her short, bright life and tragic death, had taught her mother the true meaning of success, the immeasurable value of time, the profound power of simple presence, and the enduring, unbreakable strength of love. She closed her eyes for a moment, the warmth of the sun on her face. The ache in her chest was still there, a gentle reminder of all she had lost. But now, it was accompanied by a quiet gratitude for what she had, however briefly, been given, and for the lessons that had, so painfully, brought her to this place of bittersweet peace. She opened her eyes, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. But this time, it was not a tear of pure despair. It was a tear of remembrance, of love, and of a fragile, enduring hope. A hope that she could continue to live a life that truly honored the bright, beautiful legacy of her little Lilybug. The journey was far from over, but she was no longer walking in darkness. She was walking towards the light, guided by the brightest star in her memory.